Good evening and welcome to Inside Government, a show for the spring 2023 semester here at Cayuga Community College. It's broadcast on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, as well as ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, as well as Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. Over the last year, we've tried to get tonight's guest into this studio, but I think between blizzards, snow, COVID, and a whole lot of other things, we have not been able to have Dr. Adam Effler, the Executive Director of the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council, in the studio on several different occasions. I was a little worried with the weather last night that we would have a blizzard today. But we're delighted to have you in here. I guess the fourth or fifth time is a charm. We've asked you in to give us an update not only on what the council does, but also the Owasco watershed, more particularly what's going on with Owasco Lake. So welcome back into the studio.
Thank you, Guy. Indeed, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
So you're almost on your fourth anniversary of
this
being here?
spring, I'll have been in my role for 4 years.
You were here in March. You started in March 2019. I think one
Correct.
of the first shows you did was here.
That's correct.
So for those who don't know, and if they haven't paid attention to the watershed, shame on them. But how large is the watershed?
208 square miles. And the watershed is an important context for Owasco Lake. Being that the size of the watershed relative to the size of the lake is 20 to 1. That's the greatest watershed to lake ratio of all of the Finger Lakes. And that has an important bearing on the influence of non-point source or watershed-based sources of pollution.
So runoff, things that would come through.
Correct. Yeah. Stormwater, runoff. Petroleum byproducts from vehicles, septic systems.
So in comparison because obviously this is shown here in Cayuga County, but it's also shown in Onondaga County, parts of Onondaga County. How large is their watershed?
For
Skinny Alice.
For Skinny Alice. So Skinny Alice's is more like 11 to 1 or so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if those are exact numbers, but so we're looking at almost sort of a 2-scale increase in the size of the watershed relative to the size of the lake.
And this goes, the Owasco watershed's in multiple counties.
Correct.
So what counties does it include?
So we have the 3 counties. We have Cayuga County, Tompkins County, and Onondaga County. Of course, most of the watershed is Cayuga County. And then a smaller portion is Tompkins, and the smallest portion, a very small fraction of the watershed, is Onondaga County. And
so who is legally responsible for the watershed?
Right. That's a great question. So legally, in terms of a legal framework, there is not a watershed-based legal framework beyond what we have for implementing regulations. And we have existing watershed rules and regulations that were developed and approved by New York State in 1984 that the Management Council is now charged with implementing through its Watershed Inspection and Protection Division.
Which falls under the council.
That falls under the council, yes.
So let's go to the council first a little bit, just to give an overview. You were hired as the first director in 2019. I believe you were the first director.
Yes.
What does the council do, and who makes it up?
Right. So the council is an intermunicipal, non-for-profit organization. It's really structured as a local development corporation with the objective of advancing initiatives to protect and restore the watershed for the ultimate goal of protecting Owasco Lake. Of course, Owasco Lake serves as a drinking water supply to nearly 45,000 people in Cayuga County, and also is an important recreational asset and also thereby an important financial driver for the community.
Tourism, agriculture,
absolutely. Tourism, really a cornerstone.
So on your board, I know you have, is it a representative from Owasco and a representative from the city of Auburn? Because they have been, in the past, those were the ones who were charged with enforcement, am I correct? Of rules and regulations in a loose way?
Yes, so in a loose way. So the way the board is constructed for the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council is we have members. We have a membership component of the board. And the members consist of representatives from the town of Owasco, the city of Auburn, both, of course, the water purveyors to the community, as well as Cayuga County, which is a little bit more so all-encompassing there. Right?
So Ginny Kent represents the city of Auburn?
That's correct.
Is it
yes,
still Ed
as a member?
As a member.
Ed Wagner is the supervisor for the town of Owasco. He also acts as a member. And then we also have a more expansive board of directors. And the directors are representatives from the various municipalities within the watershed. So with the directors on board currently, we have 13 in total, and 11 of which are municipalities within the watershed. Because, of course, the city of Auburn is north of the watershed. The city of Auburn is not within the Owasco Lake watershed. And Cayuga County is not exactly a municipality, spatially, that resides within the watershed, right? It has a very large portion within the watershed. So 17 total municipalities exist within the watershed, and we're looking to gain 6 more.
Why?
I've onboarded about 5 since I've started. Well, so the vision of the council is this concept of leveraging collective voices. We believe by having more representatives from municipalities at the table, all with a collective sense of urgency towards protecting the lake as a critical asset, that we will be better positioned to receive the funding and the support necessary to provide that protection for the lake.
So we've said Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council. We should say you are different from what most people know about with Watershed, and is AWLA. OWLA, Owasco Watershed Lake Association.
That's correct.
What's the difference?
We work very closely with AWLA, and the Management Council also works with a variety of lake associations across the Finger Lakes now through several programs. AWLA is one of the most proficient lake associations that I have ever worked with in the Finger Lakes. They are just incredible. They are a membership-based group, so much of their funding is drawn from their membership base. And they have done a very effective job at drawing in external funds for driving projects within the watershed.
Do they have a seat on your board?
So that's a great question. AWLA does not have a seat, and although they are an ex officio partner, they are a critical partner. We work very closely with AWLA. They are not a municipality, and based on our bylaws for the organization, the directors must be municipalities. But just to continue to build on AWLA's presence and their value, they really have brought a lot to bear towards education within the watershed, working among schools. One of the recent projects is having to do with protecting hemlock trees within the watershed. These are critical trees that grow along riparian corridors, along water courses, stabilize sediments, help prevent erosion in those corridors. They have been absolutely tremendous.
So what's the problem with hemlocks right now?
So there is an invasive insect called the hemlock woolly adelgid, and it is just reaping havoc on these trees, and so there's really not a natural predator, a native predator, we'll say, that does a good job of keeping the numbers of these adelgid low, so that they're not devastating to the local hemlock stands within the watershed. So AWLA's project recently was involved with targeting treatments for removal of the hemlock woolly adelgid, so that the trees are not adversely affected by that.
Have they been successful?
They have been successful. They have. It's a very difficult problem for the watershed, and this is not a watershed issue per se. This is really a regional issue, and so Cornell, for one, is looking at new opportunities for finding predation alternatives and testing insects that could actually come in and act as viable predators to the hemlock woolly adelgid, so that a chemical treatment is not necessarily the approach we would have to take.
So is the treatment right now chemical?
It is a chemical approach, yes.
Okay.
Yep. So,
and there are concerns about that as well.
Yes, yeah. There are concerns about the chemical approach. Generally speaking, the experts that are involved in that specific field agree, or they're in agreement, that the benefit of protecting the trees really outweighs the very marginal impacts of the chemical associated with prevention.
So you talked a little bit about how Owla gets their money. How do you get your money to run your operation? Because you have how many employees do you have?
2 employees currently. Yeah. So we staff, again, the Watershed Inspection and Protection Division. We have 2 inspectors on staff currently. The Management Council is funded largely through government grants. So our biggest sponsor being the City of Auburn, and they are keenly interested in preventive measures. Protection really is prevention, right? So we often talk about the bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach to protecting water quality. And so that's really what we do, certainly via the inspection division, is targeting those watershed perturbations that could lead to a lake perturbation. Whether it's a runoff condition, construction that's leading to sediment or nutrient runoff into the lake.
And I know Allie Berry is one of your inspectors.
She is,
and she wrote a column I think last month, and they did about 100 inspections last year. Is that what?
That sounds consistent.
Is
with
that
what I recall?
Is that a great number? Is it a workable number? Is that enough? Where is that and where do they inspect? Is it homes? Is it driving areas? Is it agricultural? Is it business, which can be agricultural and business? What are they inspecting?
Yeah, so the is it enough question is a bit of a rhetorical question, right? Is there value in having more boots on the ground, so to speak, out there and surveilling the watershed and identifying problems, working with the community to address those problems? Absolutely, yeah. There's plenty of room for additional surveillance and engagement with the community. So they do a very effective job at gaining compliance. And that's really what we're striving towards with that particular program. This program is not about punitive action and response. This is about working with the community. We can, yeah. So
did you levy any fines in 2022?
So in 2022, I believe there was only one. And so that goes to show how effective the inspection division really is at gaining compliance. Right? And that's what this is all about. Really is corrective actions, working with the community, educating them and working with them to get corrective actions on the ground.
Because she said, quoting from her piece in The Citizen, maintained a high level of voluntary compliance. So that's a key for you.
It is a key. And that's always our first mode of action is, can we gain compliance? And in large part, most people really want to do their part to protect the lake.
Before, when you were here originally with Ed Wagner, I think back in 2019, there was a lot of reliance on volunteers. Do you still utilize volunteers for inspection, or is it just the 2 inspectors?
Right. So there are instances where volunteers, members, residents, I should say, within the watershed will call our inspection division staff and inform them of issues that they observe within the watershed. So if they see, and perhaps your listeners observe or viewers observe, water quality that looks like almost perhaps chocolate milk in terms of a color contrast, right? There may be some significant issues with sediment suspension and erosion upstream, where the inspectors can spend some time on source tracking and identifying sources of sediment. The visual benefit of targeting what we call turbidity, that's sort of scientific jargon for what you see is that color contrast in water.
Professor Halfman from the Finger Lakes Institute, that was his word.
Yes, turbidity. Turbidity is a great surrogate for nutrient discharging and nutrient loading to the lake. And of course, the reason that's important, the reason we care so much about nutrients, and particularly phosphorus, is that phosphorus is the limiting nutrient associated with algae production within the lake.
So let's kind of skip a little bit forward because we only have 30 minutes. Let's talk about 2022, but it almost sounds like 2022 was dealing with some of the extreme weather conditions of 2021. Am I correct on that? You were still some issues, we had some really bad storms, especially in late August of 2021, and it kind of, I don't want to say runoff, that's the wrong word, but it kind of had a domino effect into 2022, correct?
That's correct at some level. So yes, there were severe storms in 2021. And in terms of response to those storms and restoration associated with damages within the watershed, we typically look to the soil and water conservation districts as our primary partners to assist with improvements in the watershed and following up with projects that can support the community where there's been storm-based damage. And that occurred in 2021, particularly in the municipalities of Locke and Moravia. And so as far as the effects on the lake go, there really are challenges with these very high intensity and now, of course, increasingly frequent storms that occur, really associated with climate change. And we can
so
have...
these are having an effect on the Owasco watershed. There's no question about it.
There's no question. There is no question about that. We can have years where the estimated loading of nutrients and sediment in the lake are relatively small.
Which would have been 2022.
Would have been 2020, 2022, right? And then you have 2021, where you had a scenario whereby, although generally over the course of the rainy season, things were fairly mundane, just a couple of heavy, very intense storms changed that scenario drastically.
And so, again, going back to Ms. Berry's piece, which is very clear, you had less rainfall or precipitation at the northern end of the lake, but you had more at the southern.
Yes.
First of all, about 6 inches different, 6 to 10 inches different. How is that?
Isn't that remarkable?
It is remarkable.
Right. So
it's not that long a lake.
Yes. So rainfall can occur as very spatially remote. So as much as it may be easier for our monitoring efforts to have consistent rainfall levels over the entire spatially over the entire watershed, that's not typically what we observe. Rainfalls can vary greatly over a very small area.
So you mentioned Moravian Lock, and if you have 6 inches more precipitation in Moravian Lock, that has had an impact.
So so there's that piece. There's also the piece that those particular municipalities are very flood prone in terms of their location. So in the southern portion of the watershed, there are what would be considered naturally occurring wetland areas that would be well designed, and nature, in fact, has designed to offer essentially overflow mechanisms for flooding. And so
is this the Owasco Flats area by Cascade?
The Owasco Flats area in particular, but that level, I should say, elevation really expands beyond just the flats, and it does into Moravia. I mean, the elevation is consistent through there. And and however, I think perhaps before humankind knew better, we developed towns, and buildings, and constructed.
Put blacktop down.
And we put blacktop down, and it's this is a scenario now where, of course, it's of an utmost priority to protect those communities, those infrastructures. And in doing so, we really need to support resiliency efforts.
So it's important to property owners so they don't have damage.
Correct.
As well as water levels. So how do you take care of that? And I know the council has been, I've read your last couple of months of reports, and I know you are all looking at that. How do you take care of that? How do you implement something?
Right. It's a good question. So we have this climate change phenomenon whereby changes in weather patterns and climate are greatly being impacted at a global scale, right? We talk about the effect of greenhouse gases, the importance of now carbon sequestration, right? Expanding forests, targeting, reducing the carbon impacts of our various vehicles and our industries and such. That's global. So, but our question is, so how can we engage at a local level? On a local level, when it comes to building resiliency within these flood-prone municipalities, we engage with our experts, really many of them from the soil and water conservation districts, who can help us design pathways for the water to divert roadside ditches especially, but also water courses into retention basins that allow for settling of sediments and infiltration of water in a way that is not an inundation into these towns and these municipalities.
So let me ask you, there's a book called Farmer's Law by George V. Higgins, and he says it's always about the money. So who pays for something like that?
That's a great question, because of course cash is king, and these are the sorts of
As
projects.
only a guy who runs a not-for-profit can tell you,
yes,
right?
That's true, right? I mean,
there's a limited, finite resource.
Absolutely, right? And so we recognize, the Management Council really acts as a central hub for protecting the watershed and advancing restoration projects. We are not an implementation group in terms of our staffing. We rely on our partners for that. We rely on the districts. We rely on support through Cornell Cooperative Extension, a variety of other partners. The funding typically comes through competitive grants. Okay.
So it's really up to Locke and Moravia to apply to whether it's the state or federal government for these funds.
That's correct. That's also where the Management Council can play a valuable role. And so when we get together at our meetings, I have an opportunity, our greater board has an opportunity to share information, share various grant opportunities that have become available, and to offer support and assistance to the municipalities to meet the grant proposal requirements.
So I want to go back to a little bit to the global warming and the change in weather, and obviously we've heard a lot in the last couple of days because Southern California got snow. Welcome to the world, people. But you do see more problems, cascading or domino effect for the local watershed with these extreme events over time. You don't see them dissipating.
No. Yeah, I mean, so trend analysis shows a clear signature that climate change will lead to increasingly intense and increasingly frequent storms. This is something that we need to be prepared for.
And so how does that impact the 45,000 people who get their drinking water, whether it's through Owasco system or the city of Auburn's? That's going to impact them as well. Am I correct on this?
Well, so when we talk about the impact of those 45,000, we're talking about water quality, the extent to which drinking water is safe. So we've got this flood resiliency topic that we reviewed for these southern municipalities that are flood prone, right? That's one watershed challenge. But then we also have the drinking water safety challenge, and I think that has been one that has garnered a lot of discussion in recent years, especially concerning harmful algal blooms, otherwise known as HABs, that have associated toxins. And so when it comes to severe storms, the question then would need to be, to what extent do severe storms impact water quality in terms of toxins and whether or not the water would be safe to drink?
So did we have more blooms last year? To me, it sounded like we didn't close the number of times. When I say close, we didn't close beaches or areas as much as we did clearly the year before because there was heavy weather.
Mm-hmm.
Was it just we were lucky last year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the reported number of blooms is based on a voluntary surveillance program. And this is one of the programs that the volunteers from Aula do a very effective job at implementing. However, their surveillance program is very easily and very much impacted by what's called sampler's bias. Okay. And so what that means is the extent to which folks are actually out there and making observations,
and reporting them effectively,
going to the same place. The challenge with harmful algal blooms, they're spatially and temporally remote. They're not well understood at this point.
So I want to talk about two other items. One, it's been in the news since I think 2016, and I don't want to get into the technical pieces, but there's been this talk of this 9 elements plan.
Mm-hmm.
Simply, what is a 9 elements plan? Because I know it deals with the HABs.
Right.
Okay, so what's the plan in general? What would be what?
Yeah, right. So why is it called a 9-element plan? The reason that it's called a 9-element plan is there are indeed 9 elements that make up these plans. They include stakeholder involvement. They include identifying potential sources of pollution. They include identifying potential mitigation mechanisms. They include also performance monitoring criteria.
So why do we need one?
So in our case, the 9-element plan framework was recommended and really was created, if you will, out of New York State, and it's based on the EPA and the understanding of the fact that for Owasco Lake, our lake challenges are involved with, as I referred to earlier, non-point source or watershed-based pollution. Okay, going back to the 1970s, the problems we encountered were point source based, right? Factories, wastewater treatment facilities. We've come a long way. Those are upgraded. Now we're experiencing issues with watershed source pollution. Okay, so what we at a fundamental level, the 9-element plan, we are told now that it's approved by New York State.
So finally approved after 6 years.
Yes, finally approved after 6 years.
And you're one of the first?
We are the first of the Finger Lakes to have a 9-element plan approved. We now understand that that plan will act as a pathway to funding. And what I mean by that is when we write project proposals, as long as what we're proposing includes projects and programs that represent the recommendations of the plan,
so that should
state
drive
dollars
money.
should come to us. Yes.
Why did it take so long to get it approved?
These things always take longer than we think, don't you know?
They do.
They really do.
So you're also a landlord of sorts.
Yes,
so
that's correct.
And I found this odd, not odd, but interesting that you have started to take possession of property.
We have.
First of all, why? And second of all, where?
Great questions, right? We are now watershed stewards in terms of land stewardship. In January of this year, we closed on a 161-acre property in the towns of Sempronius and Summerhill, very small portion in Summerhill. The reason that the Management Council decided to venture down that path was to provide services for protecting what are called ecosystem services. Ecosystem services really are provided through the growth of trees, through the ability for vegetation and natural ecosystems to allow sediments and pollution to settle, and really. Your first question.
So why are you doing this? So
why?
In a sense of, will you be doing more of this? I'm assuming somebody donated the land.
Yes.
So they had a tax benefit.
Yes.
For doing so.
Well, so not so much. No. So what this was a transfer agreement, essentially a gift from the Nature Conservancy. The Nature Conservancy is a very close partner of ours.
Okay, so it was not an active property that was on the tax rolls.
No, it was when they purchased it. They had the property for almost 2 years, had acquired it through grants, through New York State grant programming. And what they do is they look for local stewards. We can facilitate that role fairly well, right? We have an inspection division. We can meet an annual inspection requirement, survey the land, and provide a property inspection. And also, frankly, having a property, which, by the way, we've named this property the Fillmore Nature Preserve. The public is allowed to gain access. No hunting, though. Now that we own a property, I really believe that we are building what I would refer to as organizational resiliency, right? I don't think that there's one person that I've worked with that would say, geez, the Management Council, what are they for? We don't want them around. Let's dissolve them. But guess what? As we continue to build our purpose and our value for now stewarding land preserves within the watershed to protect water quality,
you will take over or be gifted more land in the future.
We are considering such, yes.
I want one last question because we do have to wrap up.
Sure.
I know Senator Rachel May, who is new to Cayuga County, has addressed your board. Is this the first time? I thought I read somewhere this is the first time a New York State senator has had all of the watershed.
That's correct. Yes, we're very excited about, with the sort of redistricting.
Do you think that will drive, she's obviously in the majority, she'll be here next week sitting in that chair. Do you think that will drive more money to your efforts?
Well, I sure hope so. So
okay.
She has been a very strong proponent of our work. She understands the sense of urgency of the community associated with the recent lake perturbations, the water quality issues associated with HABs toxins, and she's really been in our court on a variety of projects. So yes, my hope is that she will help drive funding to our local community.
I didn't cover a lot of stuff, including new priorities. I'd love to have you back. I don't want any COVID or blizzards in the way, but maybe in the fall or next spring, we'd love to have you back to give us
it's my pleasure.
An update. Our guest has been Dr. Adam Effler, the Executive Director of the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council. We want to thank him for joining us and giving us an update on what the council is doing. Some very exciting stuff in Cayuga County. We will be back in just a moment with Cayuga County Chamber of Commerce Executive Director Amy Fuller and Jessica Wrench, their education coordinator. We'll be back on Thursday as well with an interview on Inside Government with Assembly Minority Leader Will Barkley, who now has parts of northern Cayuga County. We'll also have telecom director and professor Steve Keeler in the studio to give us a telecom program update and changes that are occurring here within the college. In the coming weeks, we will have Senator Rachel May, Assemblyman John Lamondis, Cayuga County Legislative Chairman David Gould, Cayuga County District Attorney Brittany Antonacci, the new head of the Cayuga Economic Development Agency, Michael Martin, and father of Vasil Kopanek of St. Peter and Paul Ukrainian Church, as well as film director Locke Phillips and Cayuga Community College President Brian Durant. We'd like to let you know that if you have questions for us, just send them to us by email, cozguytho@aol.com. And give us ideas for future guests or any questions you want us to ask of our guests, we will do so. But in the meantime, I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. We want to thank you for watching. Stick around for Beyond the Front Page. Otherwise, we'll see you back here in the studio on Thursday.